Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're going to be speaking with Peter Winter today, so stay tuned. And welcome to MentorTalks. My name is Asha Bay, and I'm joining you from Washington, D.C. and the Office of Alumni Affairs in ECA at the U.S. Department of State. Our office opens the door to alumni networking, professional development, and grant opportunities. Where are you joining us from? Let us know in the comments. MentorTalks is a virtual series that features exchange program alumni sharing their stories, mentorship, and advice. This is your opportunity to connect with these leaders and mentors. Like our guest today, Peter Winter, an exchange alumnus of the Student Ambassadors Program and a career Foreign Service officer.
Hi, Ashley.
Hi. Peter currently serves as Special Assistant in the Office of the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at State. During his career as an FSO, Peter has served overseas in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and China. His next tour will be as Deputy Spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. Before we get into conversation with Peter, we'd like to hear from you, our online viewers. What would you like to ask Peter about? Post your questions in the comments. Now, let's turn to Peter.
Hi, Asha.
Hi.
It's an honor to join you all and glad to get this chance to talk to the exchange alumni as well as any other listeners out there. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Thanks for joining us. So glad you could take time out of your busy schedule. So we have limited time, so we're going to dive right into our questions. And our first one is, what led to your role as manager for the Student Ambassadors Program at the Shanghai Expo?
Sounds good. Yeah, that's a big question. I'll try to recap my my quick life story here in a few minutes. I guess kind of just start way back at the beginning. I'm from a small town in northern New Mexico called Taos, which is an incredibly diverse, very culturally rich town that has like a centuries old artistic community, amazing skiing and outdoors, and is actually home to the Taos Pueblo, which is a 1,000-year-old Native American community and actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But Taos is really small. And so there's only about 6,000 people in the town, maybe about 30,000 in the entire county. And so, it's one of these places that I don't think I fully appreciated until I had actually left town. But as a kid growing up there, it's small. You want to see the world and get out there. And actually, my mother was a travel agent, and so we had magazines, of far-flung places and photos kind of lying around the house all the time. And so it instilled that desire to get out and see the world. I think that's the more wholesome or more classic story. Probably the more kind of entertaining and maybe even honest story is that, like every kid out there, you have your movies, your TV shows that are influential. And for me, it was oddly Mission Impossible 2, which by no means is a Oscar-winning film, but it came at like a very impressionable time in my life. And so, nothing about it is like realistic about the jobs overseas working for the government. It did spark me as, like an impressionable young high schooler to look into what it would take to do an international career working overseas for the government. And so, things like studying foreign languages, studying abroad, international relations, politics, all of that kind of interconnecting with my desire to get out of my hometown and see the world, spurred on that next step. And so in college, I jumped into studying Mandarin Chinese, as well as international relations. I studied abroad for a year in Beijing, trying to dive deeper into the language, also taking advantage of the opportunity to really travel around the country. I'm proud to say I've actually been to every province in China over the past couple of years. And so really taking the opportunity to kind of get out there. When I was back from studying abroad, I went to the University of Southern California. And when I was back, the school had a US-China Institute, as well as a Center on Public Diplomacy that I started working at to kind of really, take what I was learning overseas and try to apply it in some real world fashion, which all led, a long way of saying all led to the World Expo in Shanghai in 2010. Just to kind of paint the picture of what these events are, the expos, more commonly known to Americans as the World's Fairs, are just absolutely huge gatherings of the world's countries and people. These expos happen the big ones happen every 5 years. They run for about 6 months. And every country that's participating, builds big and small pavilions, what they can fill with really whatever they want to showcase about their country. And so, Americans kind of tend to forget about these fairs because the US hasn't hosted one since the 80s, but the rest of the world is certainly watching and paying attention to these events. In Shanghai in 2010, over 70 million people went to the expo. The US Pavilion at the time saw about 45,000 people coming through every single day, which, to put that in perspective, is roughly on par what Disneyland in Los Angeles does every day for the entire park. So just an incredible group of people coming through. And one of the kind of iconic or quintessential programs that we have at the US Pavilion is this student ambassadors or youth ambassadors program. So what this is we find around the country, young American students and leaders that really are representative of our country and our diversity, and we take them to these expos to be our face, be our guides, to interact with the guests and meet people around the world. And so in Shanghai, we had about 160 student ambassadors, all fluent in Mandarin, that were there every single day, engaging with the guests, answering questions about the United States, really kind of delving into anything that the guests might ask. Over the past couple of years, there's also been expos in South Korea, in Italy, and Kazakhstan, and we've had youth ambassadors at every single one of those events. And actually, we're getting ready to open up another USA Pavilion at the World Expo in Dubai, opening this year in October. We'll have another 75 American, young American leaders there to represent us. And so I don't think I have to tell this group about kind of the power of exchange and the opportunities that really come with people meeting face to face and getting to speak to one another. But it's our hope is that this really adds to the experience and a lasting impression of what the United States is all about. And so if you have the chance to head to Dubai and starting in October for 6 months, come by the US Pavilion and say hi to us. Okay.
So, but how do you get started as a student ambassador? Like, where do you find out information about the program?
So the US Pavilion, I mean, we have a website that over the past 6 months, also in partnership with Global Ties US that has worked with the State Department on a lot of exchange programs, was pushing out a lot of information to local organizers and universities and community members to recruit these youth ambassadors. And so the deadline is closed for this go around, and we have an amazing crop But there are future expos, including in 2025 in Osaka, Japan, which we will be eager to recruit even more youth ambassadors and others to work with us at that event.
Cool. And so I'm assuming there's an age limit for the youth ambassadors.
It's actually kind of varies from each of these programs. It tends to be under 30, but it's both students and young leaders.
Oh, great. Okay. So anyway, but one thing I want to talk about also was I know you did this great ride forward where you did, and this was kind of in between the expo and becoming a foreign service officer, right?
That's right. Always a fun, probably a more exciting story. So after working at the expo in Shanghai, it's this experience where you're seeing so many people from around the world and what these countries have to showcase, and it really just kind of puts that travel bug in your mind. And so a friend and I wanted to take the next step and see some more of the world. And again, like kind of going back to influential TV shows and movies, we had just watched, there was a BBC series called Long Way Round, which was like actor Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman riding motorcycles from London all the way to New York City, kind of the long way around, right? And so we naturally thought, why can't we do the exact same thing? The kicker for me, though, was that I had really never ridden a motorcycle. My friends were experienced riders, and I don't know, somehow convinced me that this was the way to go about it. So we should all buy motorcycles and head to Southeast Asia and see the world down there. And so over the next couple months, we went out and bought these motorcycles, and after a lot of bruises and hiccups, I started to get the hang of it. And we headed down after Expo was over to starting in southern China and then working our way through Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia. Did this big motorcycle trek that we dubbed the Great Ride Forward. So over those couple months, we did it for about 3 months. We drove about 8,000 kilometers, about 5,000 miles, just going through these countries and in every corner of these countries that we could get to. And so, I mean, just an incredible experience. In hindsight, a lot could have gone wrong, and a lot did at times. Here's actually a picture of us crashed on the side of the road in Laos after we hit an oil slick on the road. But these were the kind of things that you couldn't anticipate or plan for that made the travel so fun. And we found ourselves in corners of these countries that were well off the beaten path or well off the tourist guidebooks, meeting people and kind of seeing sights and experiencing things that we really couldn't have ever imagined or planned for. And I think that alone is what was so enticing about the trip. And as listeners in here are thinking about traveling around the world and getting out there, I would strongly encourage to kind of think through how can you go about it in a way where you're going to see new things and be exposed to things maybe outside of your comfort limit. Probably some parents would kill me for saying like get on a motorcycle and go drive around the world, but it worked for us, and it's one of those memories and experiences that I'll take with the rest of my life.
Yes. Yeah. So speaking of unexpected meetings, so you met your wife in the Foreign Service, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So my wife Dory, we met on our first tours in Shanghai, and very common interests, hit it off, and just synced right from the get-go. And we both wanted to be in the Foreign Service and wanted to see the world, and so found ourselves meeting at just the perfect time in our lives. And so that all said, I mean, it can be a tricky lifestyle, being in the Foreign Service and bouncing around the world, a tricky lifestyle for families and relationships. Our while we met in Shanghai, our second tours with the State Department she was assigned to Israel and I was assigned to Saudi Arabia. And so while we were in the geographic proximity, I mean, the distance is hard, but there are so many benefits to it too. So, in those 2 years that we were posted apart, we took advantage of it to try and explore the region, take amazing trips outside of our countries, and see, just maximize that situation to the fullest. We found ourselves actually getting married in Cyprus because we were in the area and we needed to find somewhere where we could make it legal before we moved onwards to our next assignments. And so after those years in Israel and Saudi Arabia, we headed together to Pakistan, and now back here to Washington, D.C., where we've been for a few years. That said, we're getting ready for another move, this time probably a bit more complicated because we welcomed our first son a few months ago, Nate, and he's already a handful, but we're proud because he already has his diplomatic passport and is ready to get on a plane. And so we are headed to Cairo, actually just next month. And so, it can be a lot to uproot your family and your house and leave family members behind every few years. But I will say that the Foreign Service community and the State Department community is very quickly becomes your family and kind of a built-in support network. We were very lucky and fortunate that Congress had passed paid parental leave. Honestly, it went into effect just a couple weeks before Nate was born. And so both my wife and I had 12 weeks paid leave with our son right after he was born. And I can honestly say, one, I can't imagine how people did this without the parental leave. It's a handful for sure. But two, I can say I'm even more devoted to the organization and our mission, knowing that it values your family time and your life outside of the job. It's this career, you blend your life and both your work and personal life very quickly, and so it's really special to have those moments with your family. And so I hope Nate likes it. I asked me in a couple years, if when Nate is like speaking Arabic and I don't understand a word he's saying and talking back to me, but for now it's the advantages to our family and what we want to do is perfect.
Yeah, that's great. I'm married to a Foreign Service officer, so I've experienced those moves also. And
perfect, you know it well.
Yes, exactly. And you're right. It is a great community. And yeah, it is interesting how the personal and the work blend together. But everyone's really dedicated, and it's been great.
It's a great community, yeah.
Yeah. So we have limited time, so let's get to some questions from our viewers. We have one from Hui, who asks, "How do you advise connecting students during the pandemic?" I think some other countries are still. I think various countries are at different stages of the pandemic.
Yeah, this is certainly something that we've been looking at closely here from the State Department as we run any number of exchange programs that, in particular, our international visitors program, bringing people to the United States for several weeks to experience programs on specific topics, or connecting Americans overseas. It's been hard during the pandemic. What we have seen though is an incredible kind of learning experience and boon in these virtual programs. And so, what kind of tended to be afterthoughts have really become a staple of how we're connecting people. And so, I think there are lessons to be learned and ways to be improved. But whether it's, an educational experience, cultural, or otherwise, just just having these platforms and kind of the guides to engage on whatever topics you're interested in are extremely beneficial. And so, for listeners here, I'm glad you're taking advantage of the opportunity to connect with Asha and me and others. We would love to hear kind of your creative ideas and how you're using these tools in your own countries and communities.
Cool. Yeah, and that's interesting because we had another question there. Let me see. Also, so what advice would you have someone who wants to pursue an international career?
Yeah, I mean, there's I think everybody has their own wisdom and guidance, and part of it is just finding what works for you and your own desires. I mean, what I would definitely say is, pay attention to the news, read the news. I don't mean just, the headlines or a quick scan, but trying to dig into the issues being reported on. Magazines like The Economist, The Atlantic, others, when I was studying to take the Foreign Service test, were just really helpful in kind of getting to that next layer of the issues that you're seeing pop on news networks, and understanding the deeper dynamics at play. So that's certainly tip number one. I mean, tip two, kind of dive straight in. A lot of careers require, or a lot of, international jobs, language skills are quite important. This, listeners here, I suspect, value and appreciate the need for some of those language skills. But it, aside from actually just studying the language, the process of doing so is such a gateway to these countries and to other parts of the world. And you can study the history, you can study the culture, the politics, the economics, all of that while delving into the languages. And so, between those two things, I think you're well on your way.
Okay. So now we have a question for Brittany, who wants to hear more about your career in the Foreign Service and also working at the World Expo. And you also worked at 2 World Expos. So
yeah. So I worked at the 2010 Expo in Shanghai, and as well as the 2012 Expo in Yeosu, South Korea. Those experiences were kind of my first experiences in working closely with the U.S. Embassy and consulates in those cities, or in those countries. And I could see what Foreign Service officers were doing, what our local staff at these embassies were doing, and how powerful it is to connect, foreign publics, foreign audiences with what we're doing from the United States. And what you find is just, goes without saying, such shared interests and common goals. And so that experience of seeing this at these expos is what led me to want to be a Foreign Service officer and be a public diplomacy officer, where we have these kind of opportunities frequently. There's any number of stories I could probably go down the road with the Foreign Service, whether it was in China, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, or even back here in Washington. But I'll kick it back to you and we can go from there.
Okay. Oh yeah. Well, I was speaking of Saudi Arabia. I think you have one of the highlights from there. You actually worked with our special envoy for climate, Secretary Kerry, or former Secretary of State Kerry.
That's right. This meeting actually here in Washington D.C. when the current Saudi foreign minister was here, but also when I was in Saudi Arabia, then Secretary John Kerry came through a number of times. But this picture was actually in far north in Saudi Arabia, in Hafr al-Batin, which is quite close to the Iraq border, and had come in for leadership meetings, and so one of those classic quintessential Foreign Service officer jobs is staffing these high-level visits. And so wherever they're descending upon, usually in the capital cities, but sometimes not, we get there, we make sure the meetings and trip is going to go as planned. And so that's what we were doing in that picture. But yeah, I was in Saudi Arabia for 2 years, from 2015 to 2017. I was the public affairs officer at our consulate in Dhahran, out in the eastern province, which is a small consulate, but just an incredibly dynamic community out there in the eastern province. And so one of my highlights, again, which I think this group can really appreciate, was working with our alumni network of Saudi Arabian students that were had come to the United States either for university or short-term programs, and had been moved back to their country and were wanted to stay engaged and continue to work together on what we were really trying to achieve together. And so we hosted, at the time we hosted a big alumni conference for all alumni in Saudi Arabia, came out to visit us in Dhahran. We had a big focus at the time on entrepreneurship skills. And so it was about connecting, American tech leaders and Saudi tech leaders, business leaders, together in the same forum, both for our younger students who are looking to pursue careers in these fields, but also for our mentors to learn from the younger generation about what they wanted to see happen in their country and in our country. So it just a really exciting community, and I imagine I know that is mirrored in almost every country in the world with our alumni networks. So it's always exciting to see what they're up to.
I know we have a great alumni network. And we have some more questions here. One is from Akoy, who asks, how does the process of recruitment for the US Pavilion at the World Expo work?
Yeah, so there's a couple elements to it. So as I mentioned, we have our Youth Ambassadors program, and that's for American students and citizens that are looking to are recruited out of universities and communities here in the U.S. To go and represent for us overseas. Separately, at the U.S. Pavilion itself, we have any number of jobs, whether it's from protocol to operations to entertainment management to sponsorship duties, and that the U.S. Pavilion itself directly recruits for employees for those positions. And so I would encourage you all to visit our website and check out some of the job postings there. A quick Google search of USA Pavilion 2020 will find you.
Okay, great. Yes. So yeah, I was gonna say, I know that we would love alumni to join us at the next pavilion, and so it's still open for alumni to come and join us in Dubai, right?
Absolutely. So the doors open in Dubai on October 1st. It's a 6-month expo, and so you probably need a couple days, at least 2 days, to kind of get the full experience. But it promises to be just a world-class event. So excited to see you all there. Great.
And so when alumni go to the expo, what are some of the benefits that they can expect to get out of it? I mean, I'm assuming there's the networking, but there might be also job opportunities or other things, learning about businesses.
Yeah, so there's kind of a couple probably layers to all of that. So part of it is just being a visitor to this massive fairground, and so I think it's about 192 countries participating in the Dubai Expo, and so each of them will have a pavilion filled with content from their home countries, and I mean that's the true experience, is for this crowd that loves connecting with people from around the world. There's no better place than an expo, because you find everybody right there at your fingertips, and so that's really number one. Two, yeah, there are kind of deeper levels of engagement as well. So at the U.S. Pavilion, we're going to host a number of we'll have cultural performers that are coming from the United States out to the expo. We'll also have business delegations, educational delegations, a whole kind of host and suite of programming and events and speakers that we invite you all to be a part of. And so more details on specific schedules to come. But I promise you that any given day that you go to the expo, you're going to find that kind of opportunity and experience.
Great. That sounds so exciting.
Yeah, I am excited for it.
Cool. So you're going to be there.
I will definitely make a few trips from Cairo.
Okay.
I have one of the things at expos, it tends to be collecting pins from each of the countries. People also get kind of like novelty passports, and you go to each of the pavilions and get a stamp. And I have quite the collection brewing from the past couple expos, so I need to keep it going.
Keep it going. Good. Yes. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of running out of time, but there were a couple more questions I think we have for you. Can you tell us more about the scholarship you established with your wife, Dory?
Oh yeah, I would love to talk about that. So yeah, back in my hometown of Taos, I again, as I was kind of talking at the beginning, that this is a small town that has a lot of energetic, young people trying to do big things, and we wanted to try and support that and give people the kind of opportunities that I was fortunate and privileged enough to have when I was coming out of high school and in college and studying abroad and all. And so working with a local community foundation, the Taos Community Foundation, we started something called the Taos Diplomat Scholarship, which is, it's a small scholarship, but it's for enterprising high school seniors in high school who are interested in studying the world, however you might define that, whether it's international relations, whether it's sciences or engineering, anything where you're looking to have a international impact, we want to support. And so, this modest scholarship that we're really hoping to grow in the years and decades ahead seeks to support, a few graduating seniors each year to explore these fields in college or through a technical education program, or even just traveling overseas. So I it was one of these things that was surprisingly much easier to start than we had really anticipated. And so, bless you. And so, as listeners are interested in kind of giving back to their community as well, bless you.
Thank you.
They, consider what you can do with kind of local community foundations, local education foundations, even just, giving a kind of a mentor talk like this. It's so valuable to young people as they're considering what to do next in the world.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So Peter, before we go, what would be your number one tip for becoming a Foreign Service Officer?
Ooh. So I already said one, read and delve into the news, track that next layer of the stories, try to understand what are the forces at play behind what you're reading in the news. But two, and to be honest, just take the test. So the Foreign Service test is open to all Americans. There's no educational requirements. It's truly open to everyone. And a lot of people, myself included, always kind of were waiting to think like, well, I just need a little bit more experience, or I need to do this extra semester or what have you, just to get the skills to be able to take the test. That's not the way to look at it. There's no penalty if you fail the test the first time. You can take it again. There's a short waiting period, but you can do it again. I myself went through the process and got all the way to the end, and then failed at the last step my first time. So got sent back to the beginning, but wanted to do this work again. So jumped back on the horse to take it again. And so that experience of taking the test and seeing what it's all about is invaluable when you do it again. And so if you're even marginally thinking about you want to see what the Foreign Service is all about, just get out there and take the test.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard some people have taken it like 7 times.
Yeah, it's a devoted group.
So, exactly. Yes. And I guess the advice there is don't give up, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, so thanks very much, Peter, for being with us today. And a big thank you to you, our online viewers, for participating. And thanks for all your questions, too. If you're interested in learning more about our awesome exchange alumni, check out our new podcast, Voices of Exchange, which is available on all major podcast platforms. And you can also find it on our website at alumni.state.gov/voices of exchange. In addition, you can connect with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So thanks everyone for watching, and see you all in the fall for our next Mentor Talks.